back.
Yeah, mic check. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Kickin the Real podcast. I'm your host, Andy Diosa. This is your first time listening. Thank you for listening. For your multiple time listener, thank you for being here. We're back once again. I got my two good friends in the building with me. And if you're watching on YouTube, which I always tell you, please watch on YouTube. I've said this a million times. This is a way for me to flex the jersey collection. Now, the last episode was the LA Galaxy episode. And I ran into my buddies after LAFC game, and they're like, why were you wearing an LA Galaxy jersey on your last podcast episode? So it was only right to take it to the other side of LA and flex, no pun intended, with the LAFC jersey, the LAFC hat. I got two legends in the building with me. We got Scarf, we got Philly from Defenders of the Bank. My brothers, thank you for coming through to kick with me. How you doing?
Andy, thank you, my man, for having us on. You know, we go way back from before when we were all just lounging around that LAFC press conference room, and you've blown up. You're kicking it real all over MLS these days, and I got to say, man, we could not be happier for you, and we could not be more grateful to be on your podcast, my friend.
Yeah, 100%. Once you went solo, we were more than happy to help promote without you even having to ask us. I think we go back to a time before you even referred to us as your favorite nocturnal podcast. So that's a number of years. At this point, we've probably forgotten more games than anything else, just haven't been there so many times. But no, it's a real honor and privilege, my man. Two fellow East Coasters in the house, along with some West Coast representation and that of the Scarf, is always good stuff.
Love it, man. And that's the first point I wanted to touch on, man. These are some true LAFC OGs, and I just love that being around the team from the beginning. I got there a year too, but it's felt like I've been around for so much longer now, and just seeing so many faces come and go, but also seeing familiar faces. And if you ever go to BMO Stadium, previously Banc of California Stadium, there's a ranking of celebrities that usually go there. If we're not talking about staff or players, I'm gonna put the Defenders of the Bank probably like maybe two on that list, maybe behind like JT doesn't count because JT's front office. Maybe Max Bretos, who's a former guest of the show as well, and then Defenders of the Bank here, Scarf and Philly always around. I love just being able to run into them year after year and just conversations about everything else, not just LAFC. But it's been great to obviously follow you guys and your podcast, which I'll let you guys talk about as well. But like you mentioned, just be there and just talk. And I appreciate the support of my show. From day one, like Philly mentioned, it wasn't anything that's like, hey, could you help me plug the show? But it's always loving this community. My favorite nocturnal podcast, as I've coined it, and it's always a pleasant re-encounter when we see each other in the stadium, whether it be in the press box or in the post-game press conferences. But I do want to start with the origin story, as I do all the episodes. So let the people know what's the origin story behind you guys starting the Defenders of the Bank podcast.
Yeah, I think what makes it so unique is that you mentioned we got the West Coast flavor with me, you got the East Coast flavor with Philly, although my family is all from back east and we're both diehard Mets fans. That's kind of what makes this pod special. Born and raised Angelino, that really feels like for the first time, my city, my culture, that energy of Los Angeles is represented on the pitch. Then I got Philly, the East Coaster, where everything moves too slow for him, no matter what speed it's at. And the thing is, we met in Founders Club at BMO Stadium back when it was the Bank. We actually didn't even know it, but we met several times earlier at other events leading up to the team kicking off. But there was this loud guy a couple rows behind me. There was this loud guy a couple rows in front of him. And sooner or later, he convinced me. I'm a middle school teacher. I have no business being on social media, but he convinced me 331 episodes ago now to co-found Defenders of the Bank with my man Philly. And I think it's that yin and yang, that back and forth that we provide that really makes what we do not just special, but so much fun for us. Like it's never seemed like work. You mentioned it, nocturnal podcast. We used to go until 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and it never felt like work. It felt tiring, that's for sure, but it never felt like work.
Never felt like work, but after so many years of doing it that way, we figured maybe we hit the reset button a little, wait an extra day, let the festivities, if you will, kind of ooze their way out of our systems and maybe speak on the podcast level-headed. But true to Scarf saying, he's an Angelino born and bred, which is odd that he was a big Met fan. That's how he bonded initially. But like he said, his family's from New York. I represent a significant portion of the population that live in Los Angeles right now, aka transplants, people from the East Coast wanting to dart away from those terrible winters and settle in somewhere where you got a lot of like the same things, the hustle and bustle, the entertainment, the culture, the food, the diversity. So, I mean, LA is attractive in that sense. So I obviously come in with that level as well. And Scarf's right. We met at a Walker Zimmerman event back in 2018, maybe even 2017. I forget. But Panda, my wife, was wearing a Walker Zimmerman jersey, and Scarf actually had the first conversation with my wife rather than having a conversation with me. But lo and behold, we'd find ourselves in Founders Club. Yeah, that guy's 2 rows in front. I'm behind them. We just start getting to chatting. Like, you're a Met fan. I'm a Met fan. You're a Met fan. Why the hell are you a Met fan? So 2 suckers that are sadomasochists for baseball punishment just got together and created a soccer podcast. And just so much more to it. But that's basically scratching the surface on the origin story.
I love that, man. You said 331 episodes. It's amazing. Like I mentioned, I coined them my favorite nocturnal podcast. It's a lot of times I will leave the stadium, go home, and I'm one of those people that only works great at night. Like, there's something about the daytime that doesn't function too well for me. And I would start writing and just like trying to recap things and go on Twitter and see things. And I'm like, these guys are really recording right now after just being at the stadium at the crazy hour that I'm up writing. So I would just naturally, it would help, just listen and tune in and see what the pulse of the game was from a different perspective other than mine. So that's why I love it. And still, man, just that many episodes, being able to show that longevity along so many different seasons. Luckily for y'all, more successful ones than not for LAFC. But it just shows a lot of success in that there's an audience, and that you guys still have that passion and speak about it. If you guys have not listened, please do check out Defenders of the Bank. It's a great podcast. I will give you the floor for this because before we get into soccer talk, we have to mention the New York Mets, who just seem to be a team of destiny right now. Can't get rid of them. So how you guys feeling after that win over Milwaukee? And man, Mets Phillies is gonna be a lot of fun.
Andy, I mentioned I'm a middle school teacher. I had almost no voice today teaching my kids the first couple blocks of the day because of what Pete Alonso did to all of us last night. Oh my God, it was incredible. Look, the never say die attitude with the New York Metropolitans this year. 2 of the greatest games you'll ever see over our last couple. Guys coming through. Frankie Lindor, if it wasn't for Shohei Ohtani being an alien, Francisco Lindor would be the MVP in the National League. And look, the worst thing about this series coming up, man, is Zach Wheeler. I can't stand that we used to have Zach for as long as we did, and we gave up on him but kept a lot of the other guys. But bonus baseball, baby, the NLDS against the Phillies. And look, I think one thing that we all agree on is I'm family friendly, but I'll just say we all know exactly how we feel about the Phillies.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if there's ever a team that I hate in the sport, at any sport, the Phillies rank up there with a couple other teams that I imagine we'll probably talk about. Or at least one other team we'll probably talk about on this pod. For me, the Mets are a lifelong love, man. I was the first team, the first sport I did fall in love with. Growing up in Queens in the 80s, I was 6 the year the Mets won the World Series in 86. It's the most incredible time as a kid to be alive. Getting into baseball, the local team was right down the road, winning the World Series. It was awesome. It wasn't cool to be a Yankee fan in Queens during that area. If you were a Yankee fan, you were ostracized. In some cases, if you were older, maybe even beaten up. But it's a team that sucked me in. They've given me far more heartbreak and heartburn and heart murmurs than joy. But you can't have the sunshine and the rainbow without the rain. And I know Dodger fans don't quite understand this, but struggle in sports is real. A bad year for them is clinching the NL West. I would love to have a history of those kind of bad years, but this is a team that, like that meme says, it builds character for the rest of your life because it is such a miserable effing franchise. But it's times like Pete Alonso hitting the home run, that game 1 against the Braves just on Monday. It feels really good because these times are few and far between, so you have to cherish them. I mean, I love the Mets. I will die a Mets fan. Got my little old Shea Stadium right here. So much memorabilia and make your head spin. And oh yes, Francisco Lindor as a pop.
Yeah, the energy in that series is going to be amazing, man. It's just, I love postseason baseball just because things shift so crazy in one swing and one pitch. And the fact that the Mets have that energy, and it's New York, man. Like you mentioned the Yankees, we won't talk about that team because I'm a Red Sox fan, but it's not hard to root for the Mets. Like it truly isn't. I think it's going to be a fun series. with energy on both sides, and I'm excited, man. I hope it goes the distance. As a neutral for you guys, I hope it's a little less stressful. But
appreciate that. Of course, you've enjoyed October baseball. Your club's been a bit more successful than ours has these past several years.
Yeah, I can't be too choosy about that, man. So it's all good. But all right, let's talk about. We're speaking about success. Let's talk about LAFC. That's why I have my guys here, and we'll start with the U.S. Open Cup. We talked after the game. We're in the press conference, and it's so weird. It's always so weird for me with LAFC because there's a narrative about the finals, and I think people are just so just ingrained in like this team chokes or whatever the case may be. But I'm like, you got to look at the other side and the fact that they're so successful in just a few years into the league. Like before that game kicked off, I said that, and I'm like, this is another huge game in that stadium. Like the fact that they've been able to play so many of those over the years is absolutely incredible. That said, of course, there was that emphasis and that necessity for them to win that game, and they did as we all expected they would. But how important of a boost is it for them to get that U.S. Open Cup? A trophy is a trophy, of course, and the celebrations. But I think Steve was very level-headed in saying, like, this is just kind of like the push in the next direction that we know we could be at that. And, it's the LAFC way. Like, they always say, if we're at our best, we could be anybody. And it was a kind of a rough patch going into that game, but they were able to turn it around and get some important goals from some players and some good performances across the board. So how important was the U.S. Open Cup victory and then just leading forward to what the future holds?
Yeah, I think it came at the perfect time because you mentioned it. Leading into that game, we were winless in 5 and looking terrible. Shut out in a couple matches, not playing well. The disaster collapse in the second half at Carson just a couple of weeks before that match. And so what it allowed LAFC to do is to kind of circle the wagons and refocus a little bit, because this was a one-off for a trophy. And it's not like it was one of those momentum building things. Like the League's Cup is just game after game after game after game. And then bam, you're playing for a trophy. This was sprinkling a couple games in May, a game in July, a game in August. And now all of a sudden in September, you're playing for this trophy. I think it was huge because what it allowed LAFC to do is reset the mindset to be able to look down the road and say, okay, it's also sporting. So this is a club we should handle. All due respect to Peter Vermees and his club, that is not a good club right now. And it's not like they had built momentum leading into that match either. So it came at the perfect time. And what we're seeing is the benefits of that, winning our next 2 games after that in MLS play. It's really catapulted us forward and realigned our focus at the perfect time this season.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been so excited to beat a team in 12th place in my entire time of following and supporting this club. But it was very important. I don't know, this weird narrative about choking and losing in the finals. It wasn't weird. Obviously, it was, it happened. But how people down the road were calling us the Clippers and the Buffalo Bills of Major League Soccer. I don't know about y'all, but the Bills never won the Super Bowl. LAFC did win the MLS Cup, and the Clippers haven't won either. So how the hell are we those guys? If you are to write, if you were a professor at a university teaching sports management, sports administration, what have you, the creation, the current going, and everything going on within LAFC should be a case study. Because in a lot of sports, expansion clubs, expansion franchises rarely have the success that LAFC has had. People will say Atlanta United came out of the gates hot, but screw that. Atlanta United had a couple of good seasons, and that was it. Where have they been since Tata Martino left? Really nowhere. They just got rid of Carlos Bocanegra, who had been there for a while. And I mean, I wouldn't trade LAFC's success for Atlanta's success whatsoever. Giorgio Chiellini, I remember saying this in the Columbus Crew post-game during the MLS Cup. Scarf and I were there. He said, you'd rather play for finals than to not. And it's so true. But getting in where, you have this constantly on your thought, fresh off of a bad loss, not a bad loss, but a loss to the Columbus Crew, you start to get that bit of doubt. As a supporter, I mentioned as a player, as a part of the front office, as part of the ownership, that win in the U.S. Open Cup got rid of that, flushed that down the toilet, because what we do know is negative thinking, negative emotion. It's a cancer from top to bottom, from the Larry Bergs to the person who just got their season tickets this season. The doubt creeps in, and it has a tidal wave effect. But since then, we've been on somewhat of a roll. Now we have 3 games left, 2 of whom are going to be against teams that are no longer in contention for postseason. And just like 2022, Andy, we had highs, we had lulls. We won over 15 games. Every year that LAFC's won over 15 games, they've been successful. Last time, 2022. I don't know. This could be a little bit of history repeating itself, but with some more silverware.
Yeah, and I think that those are both great points. And I think, like you mentioned, just the fact that LAFC has been able to do this from the beginning. Like they had one bad season, and that was the year of transition between Bob and Steve. And even then, like you know how it is, the reaction. Oh, Sharundalo, not a lot of experience. Why is he coming in? And Steve is almost like I don't want to say made the Bob era like seem distant because they did historic things with that team, but it's almost like they didn't miss a beat. Like they went on to win MLS Cup. They went to another CONCACAF final. Like it's just across the board. They've been able to sustain that success, and it is super impressive regardless of like hey, they lost this final, and the same thing with Columbus. Like sure, Columbus right now is riding this high, but lost the CONCACAF final. Like there's still those moments that lost the Campeones Cup. It's like we know how the imbalance is sometimes with MLS and things like that. So it is always a funny conversation for me. But yeah, I think the Open Cup, like you mentioned, Scarf, it was just the perfect timing for LAFC because you did feel it. And I remember I asked Kai Kamara after one of the road losses, like, do you feel the pressure? And he's like, pressure's not really a word that we use, but of course they know, like, right? Of course they're looking at the standings. They're like, mentality wise, like I mentioned, Ryan Hollingshead says this all the time. Like we could be anybody when we're at our game, but like these results one after another, you're not winning when you're used to winning. It starts turning. You start seeing players maybe just not at the top of their game. And the one thing I do love about Steve is that he has been a little more open and vocal about calling that out, not specifically, but saying, hey, some players know that they're not where they need to be. And he's, to the benefit of LAFC, he has the ability to rotate squad and not basically feel like it's a down part because there's such a talented team on the bench now, along with the starting 11.
Yeah, Andy, I think what has been most unique about what Steve Cherundolo has been willing to do, what we saw with Bob Bradley was 4-3-3 or bust, right? He was going to line up in that 4-3-3. It didn't matter who was healthy, didn't matter who was playing what position. It was a 4-3-3. What we've seen with Steve Cherundolo, whether it's 5 in the back, whether it's 3 in the back, whether it's 2 up top, whether it's 3 up top, he has been able to plug and play in a way that still allows his players to feel like they can be successful. You look at what Sergi Palencia has done. You look at what Kike Oliveira over the last couple of weeks playing either a wing back, or is he a midfielder, or he's just been able to do so many different things. And oh, by the way, still be a goal scoring threat. The way that he's been able to insert a true 9 in Kai Kamara, or maybe bring in a player like Matty Bogusz and play him in the middle and have a totally different speed, totally different offense. And now I think the last piece that we can all kind of agree on, Philly, is that we're looking to really insert that true number 9, that Olivier Giroud guy, and to see if he can actually begin to reap the benefits of Steve Cherundolo's system. Or maybe it's just more of Kai Kamara and Matty Bogusz up top, and Giroud is a luxury piece.
A luxury piece, no doubt, because if you think about it, look at the streak that they were on, setting club records for consecutive wins. We did this without the 38-year-old Frenchman striker coming in. Everybody had this notion that he was going to come in and just kill it. And coming off of a season that he had in AC Milan where he was top 10 in goals and assists, you would think that. But I was very cautious about relying so much on a 38-year-old striker. Well, he's now 38. He was 37 when he signed. But the team, the forwards, they're so young, fast, and dynamic. You throw somebody a little older, a little less speedy, and you think that's going to cause some growing pains and some problems. A buddy of mine who's a big FC Cincinnati guy said it in the most beautiful way possible. Shout out Sean Murphy. Giroud is a beautiful lion that is now thrusted into a pack of cheetahs. It's true. It's damn true. Quote Kurt Angle. So it made things a little difficult. But going back to what you were saying about Steve, the willingness to adapt to your environment shows to me like a different kind of intelligence. It's not that hardcore old school mentality where it's my way or the highway. And we start to see less and less of that with coaches of this era. Steve's not too far removed from a playing career in which, yes, mayor of Hanover, for an American to be received that well in Germany, that's huge. Germans don't take kindly to non-Germans. I'll tell you that from experience, having lived there for 4 years. Granted, you have some diverse cities, but for him to win the hearts of an entire city speaks volumes of him. And quite frankly, he's had more success as a coach than he's ever had as a player. And just the last thing I'll say on that, like think of the coaches during our eras growing up. Your Bob Knights of the world would never succeed in today's era with today's kids. Why? Because it was that Bob Bradley mentality of my way or the highway. Steve adapted. Steve found the talents in a lot of these players, moved them around, shuffled the pieces around. I mean, hell, Omar Campos was a midfielder last game. Goes to show you that the willingness to adapt comes from a very educated and very smart X's and O's perspective.
I love that you mentioned too, like he's not far removed from a playing career. Like Sergio Palencia has been amazing, and if you think defensively for LAFC, like how good was Diego Palacios in the time that he had to mold that Steve had with him to basically make him improve and mold him. Ryan Hollins said it like always seems to have an effect on any game, and then there's just defensively because that's the area that he played in. It's had such a benefit on LAFC, and I think that almost doesn't get spoken about enough because you're thinking about Olivier Giroud and you're thinking about all of this talent that you have in the attacking third. And it's like defensively, to me, is the key for LAFC because you know they're going to probably score a goal or two. Like that's not a problem. But if you have players defensively that are locked in and it seems that he does truly get the best out of all of those players, it's a good recipe for success. I mean, even somebody like Lewis O'Brien, who probably is not talked about enough either, he kind of just stepped into the midfield and I think it's been super, super monumental for LAFC. And it's just like the ability they have to have these players come in and hit the ground running is the benefit to the whole coaching staff. And I do love like the Giroud thing. Of course, you want him to come in and start scoring all these goals, but I did love him and Hugo Lloris going into the post game press conference after the U.S. Open Cup after we waited for them for a long time. But it was I think one of my favorite like moments in a while. I think like maybe when Zlatan was here, I had those that I sat back and I was like, this is actually like real life. Like these two World Cup winners, and they're talking about the U.S. Open Cup, and they're legitimately said to me like, we celebrated this almost like the World Cup. Like they were legitimately happy. And then you see Miami win a supporters shield and Messi's happy. Like, of course, these are competitive players, but they've done it at this level. And it's incredible to me that Giroud has been talked about like, oh, he hasn't fit in yet. And he scores 1 or 2 goals in the playoffs and they make a run. That's really what LAFC needs. Gareth Bale did it and it worked out pretty well for you guys, right?
Yeah, look, that's still the moment, right? For me, we just actually our season ticket rep asked us to film a little thing for 10 years of LAFC since founded back in 2014, and that's the moment, right? Gareth Bale, you go back and you could add all of his other minutes up that he played, and nothing was significant. Like it would have been a bust, and yet he dunks on Jack Elliott. Everything is forgotten. If Olivier Giroud wants to dunk on someone, wants to put a couple of those goals away, and he already has a couple of them been called back offside, right? Like he's been right there on a couple. And a lot of the time, a player, it sounds weird to say this, I know, because it sounds like I'm tooting MLS's horn, but I'm not. Sometimes they have to learn how to play in MLS, right? The service is different. The speed is different. The quality of player is definitely different at AC Milan than what you're getting in Major League Soccer. And I think that's where we're seeing Olivier really start to come around. He's getting back on side more. He's doing more dynamic things in the offense. He's just like Philly touched on, doing it a little slower than maybe all the guys. I mean, when you got Kike Oliveira and David Martinez and Denis Bouanga and Matty Bogusz and Lewis O'Brien and Timothy Tillman and all these guys that are just moving full speed ahead. And you mentioned all those wingbacks. I mean, it's a fast-paced offense. So he's got to find a way to keep up.
Very, very.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, for sure. We talk about a lot of names, and there's one constant for LAFC that's finally back. Carlos Vela is finally quote unquote back with LAFC.
Sure.
It's something that obviously people in LA or fans of LAFC rather wanted to see happen. I think it's necessary for him to get that farewell. What do you guys make of this return? Do you guys expect? Because I think one of you asked in the last game, like, are we gonna see him? Like, and Steve's like, that's not on me, that's on Carlos. It almost feels like I joked about it at the U.S. Open Cup. Like, he should give his medal to Team Security Paul. Like, he shouldn't deserve a medal for that game. And it's just like he at the opener, like the reintroductory press conference was kind of making jokes about like, yeah, I'm pretty out of shape. So do you expect to see him? Do you expect him just like be around and get that like, man, I'm out of here? He just returned to get his farewell.
I think he showed his humility during the U.S. Open Cup when Ilie wanted to kind of guide him, give him the armband, have him lift the trophy. He seemed a little reluctant to want to do it. And that shows the class. Obviously, he wasn't a part of that run. Should he really reap the rewards and enjoy it? Maybe, maybe not. But he was our first franchise. You can't really say franchise player in single entity, but you get what I'm saying. The first marquee player, the first designated player of the team. So how we treat him from A to Z sets a precedent for those that want to come over here. It's as if we would have just forgotten about Carlos and kind of let him wander off into the sunset, or God forbid, go to San Jose or go to San Diego. That wouldn't have shown a great deal of, I don't say character, maybe from the front office. You got to treat your stars well is basically the point I'm getting to. So he's now back on this team. He's pretty much written his ability to do whatever he wants. No player would ever get away with that in this club other than a Carlos Vela. I don't care who we bring in the future. But will we see him? I tell you this, you talk about his shape. He looked far worse coming out of COVID than he does right now. He looks a lot thinner, a lot more in shape than he did back then. But all it takes out of him is a couple of special moments. And one thing that he has when he hits the pitch that he's never had before, no pressure. He's not going to be relied upon to be the man. He's not going to be double and triple team like Denis Bouanga would. But if you leave that man open, he's been kissed by God with his left foot. All he needs is a couple moments, some flashes of brilliance, some space. We'll see some magical things from Carlos Vela. My fingers are crossed, though. We at least get to see him on decision day against San Jose and then have him in the playoffs and then have him as a part of the roster during the negotiation process when they bring in Antoine Griezmann next year.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. Even the way the contract was written, right? It's a contract through this year with a club option for 2025. Not Carlos, not a player option, a club option. Do I think that we're going to see Carlos in a meaningful way? I don't think we will in the regular season. I think that these 3 matches maybe come and go. We might see him get an appearance at when we play San Jose in our final match of the season on decision day. Maybe he'll be healthy enough. Maybe he comes in as a post 80th minute sub. Maybe he takes a couple corner kicks, a set piece, whatever it might be. But I don't think there will be significant moments in the regular season. And that leads me to disagree a little bit with what Philly said about no pressure. I think if it comes down to it and it's a 1-1 match in an elimination game in the playoffs, and you look down at your bench in the 80th minute and you've got number 10, Carlos Vela, sitting there, I think you've got to pull the string if you're Steve Cherundolo and say, let's see what we can get. Can he be as good once as he ever was? Because I think those days of Carlos Vela were absolutely right. It's Denis Bouanga's club now. It's Matty Bogush's club. It's Kiki Oliveira's club. But by the way, I don't think those 2 guys will be here after this season anyway. So we might have to refill Carlos Vela into some of those spots again. But I think we're looking more at the David Martinez's. I think we're looking more certainly at Denis Bouanga picking up that torch and running with it and hopefully staying with us for the next couple of years to continue that mantle of having a player going after the golden boot every single year. If we do see Carlos Vela in the playoffs, I hope they're not in super significant moments, but I think that's where we'll wind up seeing him late in matches.
One quick thing I just want to mention before we forget. Scarf said David Martinez. I think Carlos is just mere presence has helped push somebody like Martinez because Martinez lines up on the same side as Carlos would in a start. He's got that left foot that he could score with. So having Carlos in only puts the pressure on him to perform better in order to continue to maintain his minutes because he knows at the end of the day, it's probably be Carlos over him. But with Carlos there, he's fighting and he's being rewarded for it. His presence on the training pitch is leading to success during competitive matches, scoring a couple goals in his past few games. I think just having Carlos around is a big boost for somebody like him.
Yeah, Andy, looking at his last goal, David Martinez, right? 2 touches with his left foot and a rocket into the side netting. I said it on our podcast. I was like, that's Carlos Vela. That's exactly what he did. Now, Carlos curves it into the top bins, and Martinez just blasted it past the keeper. So that's a 19-year-old for you. He's blessed with a few more physical attributes than Carlos has. But if we can get Carlos to help the development of a player like David Martinez, that's exactly why you bring a player like Carlos in.
It's all spot on, and it's almost like the LAFC formula. Like we saw when Giorgio Chiellini got signed, how much they talked about his importance in the training grounds, around the team, which is why he lingered around the team after he decided to stop playing. The same thing with Gareth Bale. Even though you weren't necessarily seeing him on the field, it was still just his impact and younger players learning from players that have been around. Now, you mentioned Vela, LAFC, it's synonymous, right? Is there I think seeing him in decision day would be amazing. I don't know if it happens because it's so quick, but like just him getting on the field and that it's the last game of the regular season. It's at home, but I'm kind of with Scarf. Like if you throw him in a playoff game and it's tight, it's kind of tough because you haven't been able to see anything, right? Like granted, he could be going crazy on the training ground, and Steve could just be like, just wait, I have this club ready for whenever. And I wouldn't put it past Steve at all because he's kind of alluded to, just being a little different in approach, whether it's formation, whether it's different players in attack to kind of give the team a different look. but you said it. To me, is Denis Bouanga. Like how I don't know, because I'm not necessarily an LAFC fan. Of course, I support the team and I root for them because I have so many ties to the team itself. But how exciting is it to have somebody like Denis Bouanga, right? Like Steve said it in the last interview. Like I think Josh asked him, and he was like, he asked him about a security blanket. He's like, I'm warm and fuzzy or whatever he said. Like it's almost, I think he top 3 in the league in terms of dangerous players, and that's just because Messi's in MLS, right? And Cucho Hernandez has had a great year. But those 3, like to me, it's like change a game at any given moment, and you don't get that often, especially a player of that caliber to be able to do it the way that he does for a team of that nature, where most of the time they're probably going to be on the upper hand against a lot of teams because they're just better than a lot of teams. That's what it comes down to, right? But that's not how the game slices out all the time, and things are different. But you just watch him, and I'm like, I play defense when I play soccer. Like I would not want to have to go up against a dude like that. I don't even care if I'm like the world's best defender because you just never know what's about to happen, and it's tough. So how was it just having him? And listen, man, the Golden Boot race is technically not done yet. It's still alive, and having San Jose as the last game, listen, anything's possible. So talk to me about Denis Bouanga a little bit.
Man, Denis Bouanga, to be able to watch him play, whether he has just stepped off of 18 hours worth of travel on an airplane or he's had 7 days of rest to tackle the opposition, the dude has one speed, and it's greatness. That is his speed. Whether he's attacking 1 defender, 2 defenders, 3 defenders. And what we've seen this year is his willingness to be the facilitator at times too. He probably could have had 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 more goals, except that's why Matty Bogusz and Kike Oliveira have the amount of goals that they have. He is beyond a shadow of a doubt one of the most special talents that Major League Soccer has seen because of when he came over and how he's playing. He is a player in his physical, athletic prime, and what we're seeing from him this year, and Philly, I think, was it you that asked the question? He's hungry for that golden boot. He actually said he wants Christian Benteke's goal. He wants to catch him. That's a different side. Denis was always very demure, no, it's the club. You know, the fact that we got 3 points, he's not saying that right now. He's also saying that, but he's definitely saying, Benteke, I got you. I got you.
He's the kind of player that you would want to aspire to be like if you're a young kid. He has a hunger for playing. You have to fight him to keep him on the pine. When Scarf said it, when he came off of that flight after having done international duty with Gabon, I mean, he comes in and actually has an impact in the game right away. He wants to play. He's got a killer mentality, something what we didn't see from a lot of our past players. I would say the closest that we had to that was Dio. But Denis operates on a completely different level than even Dio does. I mean, going back to that game against FC Cincinnati, I mean, what he did to Ian Murphy was he just put him in his back pocket and then completely sliced it near side by Celentano. I mean, he made him look foolish. The best scorers of the game, the history of this game, would take a look at that play right there. And if that's the only thing they ever saw Denis Bouanga, they would think this guy is special. His ability to just completely go from 0 to 60 like that, to make a defender look silly, his power when he shoots. And now, like Scarf was saying, he's added a facilitator to his title as well. We know everybody's going to swarm in on him, but then that lets everybody else be the beneficiaries of that. So Matty and Kike had to learn how to be better goal scorers if this team was to be successful. Last year, it was the Denis show. If Denis didn't show up, our gooses were cooked. This year, Denis doesn't have to show up because there's other players that are there that can contribute. But his mere presence on the pitch warrants defenders to pay attention to him, which gives spaces open for other guys. And look at it. He's even tied Carlos Vela in the statistical category to where he's had 67 career goals in all competitions in his first 100 games. That is exactly what Carlos Vela did. And he's what? He's MLS best with 9 game-winning goals. I mean, game is on the line. That's who you want. He's ice water. Like you remember when Carlos Vela would step up 11 meters, 12 yards in front of the keeper? You didn't know which way it was going to go. With Denis, it's practically automatic. You know he's going to score. And his desire and his hunger to play, just, to me, elevates him above everybody else. He right now is going to be as of now, is my all-time favorite LAFC player. And he's still going. I love him more than Dio. I love him more than Latif. Love him more than Carlos. I never thought I would say that. Denis truly is special. Denis is the essence of LAFC and the essence of being black and gold.
No, I agree. I mean, it's an incredible player, and you could go through the list of teams in MLS, and he's probably done the same to many teams, many defenders. So it's a nightmare. I know Brian Schmetzer for sure. He talked about it coming into the season, how he's like, I replayed the goal he scored on us in the playoffs last year just to show my team, like, get ready, you know what I mean? Which is crazy for a coach to say, but it's just giving, praise to a player of that stature. The season's almost over. Regular season's almost over. It's a few games left, as we've mentioned. What have you guys thought about this season for LAFC? What are your feelings as it comes to an end right before the playoffs start? Like, it's second place in the West. It's the first place is not technically locked up yet, and it just happens to be the rival Galaxy that are up there, and which we'll talk about how that has an effect in the playoffs. But in terms of just what LAFC has been able to do this year, some bigger losses, and then the Columbus matchups, but then getting one up on Seattle basically every time they play them. How has the season been for you guys?
Man, I look down at that Western Conference standings and I think, geez, if we didn't give away 2 points here, 1 point there, we wouldn't be in. It looks like the 405. I'm trying to get home from work, man. Everything's a logjam on those standings. You've got Carson, who have opened up a 6-point window, and then you look and there's that 6-point window from like 6th to 7th. But 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, man, you have one misstep, let alone two, over these last 3 games for LAFC. And all of that work that we have built in to hopefully get 1 or 2 home playoff matches goes down the drain pretty quickly. So I think it bodes well for LAFC down the stretch because we have to maintain that focus. We have to maintain that 3 points or bust mentality no matter who we're playing. And a couple of the matches, like Philly said, 2 teams that have, San Jose has long clinched the wooden spoon. Sporting, Peter Vermees may be coaching for his job, but I don't know that the players are playing for his job very well right now. And then you've got a Vancouver club who they look like they might be resigned to where they're sitting in the standings right now. So all 3 of those clubs are going to look at our crest and go, let's knock those guys off. Let's knock them down a peg. I think it's huge for LAFC to keep our focus. But you mentioned like how I feel about the season. One of my favorite things to do when I was growing up is to go to Six Flags Magic Mountain on all the roller coasters and everything. I'm over 40 now. I don't like this roller coaster kind of stuff. I prefer a nice, easy, short ride and getting into the MLS Cup playoffs, being first. And the way we've done it a couple of these seasons, there's always seems to be a little hiccup. This season's been a little bit more hiccupy than most. But that being said, if you ask all those other clubs below us in the standings and most of those clubs over in the Eastern Conference, would you switch with LAFC? Most of them would say in a heartbeat. And so I guess we have to take a look and step back and go, all right, we're just another successful season in the books. How can we translate that to the MLS Cup playoffs?
I would say LAFC's success is similar to what you would see in like an economic cycle, meaning that, when you're starting the season, every team is going to go in one direction, in one of 2 directions. They're either going to grow or they're going to go through a trough, meaning like they're either going to be successful or they're not. But LAFC, as we've seen historically in history, has a tendency to repeat itself. They grow, they hit a peak, then they kind of dip down through a trough, then they grow, then they peak, which is what they did in 2022. I'm kind of hoping that story plays out again, because in 2022, as successful of a year that was, there was that summer where we just couldn't seem to get any wins in the state of Texas, and things seemed dire, in particular when we went down to Austin, and they absolutely gave us the bit of the how's your father? But since then, it was just a game or 2, getting the confidence back and rolling, and then you'd see how they started to perform. And we were going through that trough. But we still happen to have the ace of spades in our back pocket, the Open Cup. We win that, and ever since then, it seems like we're growing. I don't want to say we're anywhere near a peak, but I think we're starting to find our rhythms. Keep in mind that we've also tinkered with the lineup. We've added Lewis O'Brien. So that's going to, that's things up a little bit. You bring in Olivier Giroud. That's going to change things up a little bit. There was the thought of Maddie and Kike possibly going. And then once that deal sort of got nixed, that's when this little trough thing started to occur. Maybe a lull going, dang, these guys didn't get to Europe. Maybe now what they're thinking is, well, let me finish out the season as best as I can, bump my value, and then maybe I could go to Europe next season. So that's what I think we're seeing. A lot of trends this year that I'm seeing from last year. Maybe the troughs are a little worse, or maybe they felt a little worse because they're a lot fresher than 2022 was. But 3 more games against 3 very beatable teams. And if it just so happens that our friends from down the 110 happen to stumble a bit and we can capitalize on it, we win the West, and then we continue onwards. And that's what matters to us. We're not going to clinch Supporter Shield, That goes to inner Fort Lauderdale, so congrats to them. But we still have a very damn good chance at making waves, winning the West, and still winning MLS Cup.
Yeah, and I that's the important part, right? That top spot in the West, because we talk about all these teams in the West and LAFC in comparison, and like I said earlier, it's just when it comes down to it, LAFC is a better team than a lot of these teams, and not just that. When you talk about playoffs, there's a proven track record of LAFC beating Seattle, beating Vancouver, beating SKC in these bigger games. That it's like you probably going to give them the upper hand. Now, of course, you have to play. You're not going to ever overlook any opponent. But the opposition in the West, like LAFC is probably going to have an advantage in many ways, especially they're playing at home. But if things pan out, which I don't know how you guys feel about this, I would love to see another playoff Trafico. And if it does happen to be a Western Conference final one, it'd be even better because right now they're 1-2. If that game is in Carson, and you guys alluded to it earlier, the meltdown and that weird 4-2 where LAFC just cruised the first half and then just took the second one off. If that does pan out that way, and there's a lot of things have to happen that way, but this is almost like the Galaxy are still a little bit of a toss-up when you talk about defensively. Obviously, offense, they have one of the best attacking teams in the league, as LAFC do as well. How do you feel about that? Let's just hypothetical, like you have to go, what is it, down the road, down the 110 to Carson and play that game there. Because the way I see it is it's a crash course, right? And of course, everything has to play itself out and you still never know. But that is the important part. That's when you're like, man, if we would have not slipped up in these 2 points here, is 1 point here, having that game at BMO Stadium compared to having at Dignity Health Sports Park, could be the difference to a trip to MLS Cup.
Yeah, look, I think the way that we played in our last match was heartbreaking. We looked at that second half and our boys came out and had no fight. And they just kept getting hit in the mouth and kept getting hit in the mouth. It's like those TikTok videos where you watch your dad get beat up by the school bully. I mean, it was so disheartening to watch the way that we played that second half, to roll over and then get kicked while we were doing it. The 4 straight goals, and oddly enough, I've been in that stadium now twice when they've scored 4 straight goals against us. The Zlatan game, everybody forgets we were up 3-0 in that one too, but we were also mesmerized by what the hell Zlatan Ibrahimovic did over the last 10 minutes of that match that I guess it didn't sting as much or in the same way. This was different. This was our club going up 2-0 and punching them in the mouth and then coming back after the bell and saying, all right, now we've got this new arsenal. And the way that they moved the ball, the way that they passed, the way that they looked on offense with Marco Reus really revitalizing that midfield. It's no longer as much hero ball from Ricky Puig as has been over the last couple of seasons. They're still, you mentioned it, they're still playing a lot of 4-2 games, both winning and losing 4-2 matches. But that being said, what I really do admire from Carson this season, and it's really hard for me to say this, but they've turned a lot of times where they would have 0 points into 1 and 1 point into 3 this season, 1 point into 3. And those are the type of results that come playoff time. If you've proven you can grind out results like that, tend to help the cream rise to the top. And so I think LAFC has to look themselves hard in the mirror and say, okay, what can we do to prevent what happened in that second half? But what can we do, even if they just score 1 and now it's 2-1 and you start to feel that momentum shift a little bit? How do we reassert ourselves? How do we right the ship without needing to go level 2-2 to look ourselves in the mirror and go, all right, now it's anybody's game again?
They handed our asses to us. No question about that. But the way they played, it's no different than how they played a lot of other games. They found themselves down at the half or down with a significant time to go, and they've clawed their way back into the game. They even did that recently against Colorado. They went down 1-0 and then ended up coming back winning 3-1. They're a team that can score. You flip a switch on them, and they can beat you so badly on the counter. Yes, I hate to say it too, but they are a very exciting team. Dare I said if they had another crest on them, I might have even been a fan. I cannot get myself to like the team because it is what it is. It's the rivalry. We could have a podcast about that down the road. But whether it's at BMO, whether it's at Dignity, whether it's the Rose Bowl, the Coliseum, Madison Square Garden, or the freaking playground down right by Burroughs High School in Burbank, it's going to be a grudge match one way or another. And we would all benefit from this. Us as fans, us as supporters, us as media types, the Major League Soccer. Because any way you slice or dice it, this is the best rivalry in MLS. I'm sorry, Cascadia, the Hudson River Derby, hell is real. None of them matter when it comes down to this one. El Trafico is the rivalry. So if those two can get together and compete in the Western Conference Final, you're going to be in for a hell of a show. And while home field does matter, it's a whole new season. Anybody's got a fighter's chance, and we would all benefit from that tremendously. Ratings, like concessions, marketing, everything, entertainment value. It doesn't get any better than that. And I would prefer that our playoff run goes through them because, like Ric Flair said, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And they're standing on top of that podium right now as tops in the West. I don't want an injured, not fully healthy Galaxy team. I want them to have their best. So when we have our best and they have their best, the better team will win with no more excuses. Oh, well, if we only had this guy, or I don't want any excuses. I want the next round to be the last round to be against them on way to winning the MLS Cup. I would love a Western Conference final between these two. Bring it.
There you go. That's the message to the soccer gods. I hope you're listening. We all want it, not just here in LA. We want to see it as fans of MLS and fans of soccer. It would be amazing. And yeah, I think you mentioned a very important part that we could close off on. Like this time of the year, it's who's healthy, who's not. LAFC is still kind of waiting and seeing what's up with Jesus David Murillo, and Atuesta, a little bit of a knock here. But if LAFC does, in this next month or this next few weeks, rather, before the playoffs start, get those players back and kind of have their full lineup, you guys, could you foresee a run to MLS Cup? Because I mean, once again, mentioning like the team has all the traits to do so.
Listen, you look up and down our roster, there's no excuse, right? Every line, all three lines, keeper if Hugo Lloris, the back line, Sergi Palencia might be best 11 this season in Major League Soccer. We've got incredible results from guys like Maxime Chanot and Aaron Long. And dear God, if we can get Jesus Murillo back, that would be wonderful. Ryan Hollingshead, Omar Campos, guys that are playing at an all-star caliber level day in and day out on the back line. And then you look in the midfield. I'm sorry, we're just so talented in the midfield. We just have to figure out how to put it all together sometimes. If you've got Matty Bogusz, Timothy Tillman, Lewis O'Brien, who would have thought we wouldn't be talking about Edward Atuesta right now in some of these places? And then nobody needs to explain to anybody what we have on the front line. The talent at LAFC is as good or better than any other club in Major League Soccer, maybe except for Miami, because they've got a couple of guys that have done this in a few other places. But there's no excuse, right? If you put the roster together that John Thorrington and company have, and you get the results that we have for most of the season, look, it's MLS Cup or bust for us going into the playoffs. That's the bottom line.
I agree. This team was built to win trophies now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, now. And they're going to be continue to build to win now. That's always been the club's mentality. And sure, a lot of clubs can go out there and say that and blow that hot smoke, but reality is this team has contended for titles. People are clowning on us because we keep losing finals. We've been in 7 finals for the past couple of years, and the roster continues to get better. So yes, it is MLS Cup or bust, but I also have a sense of humility about me. That right there has taught me a lot of things. For those listening, rather than watching, I'm pointing to my Mets hat. I have been on the highest of the high and the lowest of the low. So I know anytime I personally puff my chest out about my favorite teams, they usually let me down. I'm going to be cautious and optimistic. But yes, this team, if they want it and they believe it, they can have it. It's theirs for the taking. They just have to want it and believe in it the same way that they had wanted it and believed it throughout their winning streak earlier in the season and that run during 2022. Can they do it? Yes. Do they have the tool pieces to do it? It's the ambition, the desire that you can't quantify. But if that doubt is there, that causes a problem. And I'm glad that U.S. Open Cup came our way because I think that now finally removes that last seed of doubt.
Yeah, I agree. 100% spot on. As always, Philly and Scarf, couldn't say it any better, man. They always bring the goods, always bring the heat. Defenders of the Banc podcast, please tap in with my favorite nocturnal podcast. It's always a pleasure, man. We could do this for hours, but it's Friday, and I'll let you guys go and enjoy the rest of what's going to be the beginning of the weekend. But we'll see each other soon at BMO Stadium or maybe down the road at Dignity Health Sports Park. So thank you guys again for joining the show, man. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Andy. You're the best, man.
Yep.
Man. Hey, if you're listening, like I said, tap into the YouTube. I'm flexing with the LAFC. I was even so nice that I changed the jersey in the back. It's usually a Galaxy jersey. I don't know if you guys noticed that. It's a beautiful
yeah.
We have. Don't worry.
But I changed it today out of respect for my guests. So this is a very versatile podcast here. But man, thanks again, Defenders of the Banc, Philly Scarf. As always, thanks to the listeners. Please tap in. We'll be back soon. Peace out.